What's up, guys? It's Toad back again. This is the college football week 5 video. Let's do it. I feel like I got something in my ear here, in my left ear. I don't know, something going on with my headphones where I can't hear what's going on in my left ear. I was just finishing watching the college football games from tonight. The Virginia Tech ending was insane. I mean, they covered the spread pretty easily. I had no money on any of those games, but they had like a 30 or 40-yard bomb at the very end of the game that was initially ruled a winning touchdown after Miami had initially come out of like an end zone pile with the ball looking like they had intercepted it. Everybody was celebrating in Miami. Then it was ruled a Virginia Tech game-winning touchdown. Then it went to review when it was ruled incomplete, and Miami wound up winning the game. Absolutely crazy. Crazy stuff. And Washington missed a long potential game-time field goal, I believe, at the end to lose to Rutgers there. Some of these games have just been wild, man. Last night, I don't know how the Dallas Cowboys-New York Giants game was the most watched Amazon Prime NFL game in history so far. I guess probably because I've only been doing it since last year, but really, a game involving the Giants is the most watched. It was a close game, I know, but just horrendous game, just so ugly. I think the Giants actually outgained Dallas in that game and still lost. It's the New York Giants. Whatever. We're here to talk about this upcoming college football slate, right? And I'm also rolling recently, man. I'm getting a lot of bets right. I won again tonight on my one bet, my baseball play on the Atlanta Braves. That was a winner. I mean, they allowed no runs in order to do it, but 3-0 win. I'm going to take it. I'll take it every time, man. Adam, what's going on, man? Good to see you in the chat, man. Nate, yeah, I was just talking about it just before you got in here. The Miami ending was insane. I root against Miami, so I was not thrilled about that. To me, it did not look like it was a catch. It looked like it was kind of rolling around, and then Miami punched the ball out, but I really don't know for sure. I wish they just let the play stand, let the call stand, because it looked like there wasn't enough evidence really to overturn it. Let's look at this college football slate, man. I got 4 plays in college football tomorrow, and I hope I don't totally take a nosedive here because my college football has been okay so far. Last week was pretty good. It's been decent. Abrogate, what's up, man? What's up, guys? Thanks for hanging out. I'm going to talk about, I'm going to try to make this not go an hour and a half like last week where I talked about way too many games probably. So I'm going to talk about obviously the games that I'm betting. One of them is one of the big ranked matchups that I have a bet on, and I will talk about the other 3 ranked matchups as well because I don't think I have a bet on the other 3. Close to having one on one of them. So we can talk about those first. Louisville and Notre Dame I'll talk about first is one of the ranked matchups. 15 versus 16, man. A matchup between undefeated Louisville and one-loss Notre Dame, where their one loss was to Northern Illinois. One of my wins last week was fading Northern Illinois, coming out of a bye, going into the bye off of that Notre Dame upset. Northern Illinois, I think, was still just hung over throughout the bye week, just probably getting really high on themselves after that win over Notre Dame. But Northern Illinois was in the top 25 rankings last week. I mean, I just had to laugh at that. It's just so ridiculous. A MAC team. They're probably like the 95th best team, and they're ranked in the top 25. All right. Let's look at what's going on in the market here in this Notre Dame game here. Oh, man, I can't even type right now. It's too late. Notre Dame, they're up from -6 to -7, but I think you can still get 6.5s out there because it looks like the 7 is at +100 right now. So that probably indicates that there are some 6.5s floating around out there. So in a way, it almost looks like the odds makers are begging you to take Notre Dame, but I think the odds makers might actually be kind of making a mistake here. And I always say the odds makers don't make mistakes. Like, they're not just giving away money, and it looks too easy almost to take Notre Dame at below a touchdown. But, well, I would think that it does, but maybe it doesn't, because this is a matchup between 2 teams that are similar in rank, even though Notre Dame obviously has the much bigger names surrounding them, but maybe not. But, well, the public is coming in on Notre Dame to the tune of 73%. So I do think that name recognition is still there. And I think the public does consider Notre Dame to be the better team over Louisville, who really just is never that great of a football program, really, compared to the history that Notre Dame has. Notre Dame has 84% of the cash, though. It looks like they do have legitimate money coming in on their side, and I've been listening to professional bettors talk about some of these games all week, and I am hearing probably the majority of them, if they're commenting on this game at all, they're kind of liking the Notre Dame side here. I can't really necessarily disagree with it, even though, like I said, it almost looks too easy to take Notre Dame, but it looks like more of the cash is coming in on them, and it looks like the books are having to move the number at least on to the key number of 7. The one thing about this game, I mean, Notre Dame, they've just kind of been cruising for the last couple of weeks. So I don't know that there's anything to take away from the scheduling spot, but I was going to say the one thing about this game is that Notre Dame might actually consider this to be a revenge game, even though I think revenge, as I always say, is a little bit overrated unless it's like revenge for some substantial loss. Notre Dame lost as a road favorite at Louisville last year, and I believe it was substantial enough because I think I was on Louisville in that game, actually. I might not have been, but I kind of remember being on it. I think I was. That game, I think, basically ended Notre Dame's playoff hopes by losing that game. I think that crushed them because, of course, the playoff expansion hadn't happened yet. It's happening this year for the first time, so only 4 teams are going to get into the playoffs last year. And I think that loss actually dashed Notre Dame's hopes, if I remember correctly. So they could have a little bit of revenge on their mind from that Louisville loss last year. So Notre Dame, I think, is not going to show up unfocused here. And they had kind of a lackluster offensive performance last week against Miami, Ohio, after they put up a ridiculous offensive performance against Purdue, smacking down their in-state little brother there. So Notre Dame, they actually haven't looked that great offensively in all these other games. I keep saying that their quarterback there, what's his name? Riley Leonard, from the transfer over from Duke. I keep saying he's trash. I don't think he's that good, but maybe I'm wrong. I mean, I'll be willing to admit that I'm wrong, I guess, if I'm proven wrong. Otherwise, Notre Dame only has that one big offensive performance against Purdue, but still, I think Notre Dame, just in general, I do think they're the better team, and I think they're coming off a game where they just didn't really care, didn't focus, didn't pay attention against Miami, Ohio. So I think, if anything, you may be getting a little bit of line value on Notre Dame, partially also because I think Louisville is overranked right now because they're undefeated. I think Notre Dame's ranking is a little bit too high at the moment. I don't think that they've done anything to really justify being ranked this high. A lot of it is just kind of what the preseason ranking was. They came in, and I mean, they've put up some decent offensive stats here, decent scores, but against Austin Peay, like, do we really care about that at all? An FCS team? I don't think we do. And then Jacksonville State, which, I mean, they're a newcomer to FBS over the last couple of years. They put together a good season last year, but I think most of the guys from that team are gone. So I don't know if that win matters that much either. And then beating Georgia Tech, Louisville actually did not play well in this game. This was actually a misleading final for Louisville against Georgia Tech. If you look at the stats here, Georgia Tech actually outgained them, and I think this one turnover was actually kind of crucial. So I don't really see any reason to think that Louisville is actually that good, whereas I think Notre Dame has actually been a bit more impressive so far this season, even though neither team really has done anything that substantial so far. Notre Dame's one loss looks really ugly, but again, I don't think you can take anything away from one bad loss or like one ridiculous win either. Overall, though, I do actually agree with the Notre Dame side here, but it's certainly not going to be a play. I mean, I'm just commenting on it because it's a game between two ranked teams, and I have heard some professionals leaning to the Notre Dame side, and the market actually does look like it's indicating sort of on the Notre Dame side. What's going on, guys? David, what's up? Yeah, that's right. You want to fade the public more often than not, I would say. Travis, what's up, man? All you guys are in the chat tonight. Some of the guys from the Better Off Dead GC as well. Thanks for hanging out, guys. What's up next here? We got there are some other ranked games. Oh yeah, the next one up is the biggest game. I'm just going in sequential order, but skipping the one I have a bet on, which is the earliest one. Georgia, Alabama. I was close to having a bet on this game, man, but I'm not gonna quite get there with this one. But this is a huge matchup, obviously. This might be like the biggest game of the year. Georgia, Alabama tends to be up there as one of the biggest games of the year every single year. This is number 2, Georgia, number 4, Alabama. I don't know if those rankings are quite accurate. I mean, I'm still sort of hanging on to the opinion that Georgia actually might still be the best team in college football, and Alabama is somewhere up there. But I think Alabama, I mean, because they've had an amount of turnover, I still think that they may have something to prove here. I actually lean to the Georgia side in this game, and a lot of it has to do with revenge. I know revenge is overstated, but I don't think a revenge spot could get bigger than what it is in this Georgia-Alabama game, dude. Everybody probably remembers what happened last year. Georgia was looking like they were headed to potentially having a three-peat and winning 3 straight championships. They had an undefeated season, and what happened? They got into the SEC championship game against Alabama. Georgia was a favorite of, I think, 3 or 4 points in that game, and they lost. Alabama beat them, and then I guess because of the way that the other games fell and who won in some of those other games, the committee left Georgia out of the 4-team playoff completely, even though I think they were still the best team in college football last year. Georgia got left out entirely just because of that one loss. You think they're going to remember that? Yeah, I think they're going to remember that, and I think they're going to have this game circled big time. So I expect Georgia to show up in this game. So I do think that that's actually one really big factor in this game, one reason that I like Georgia. Another reason that I like them is that they actually haven't looked that good this season, mostly because of this Kentucky game that they played last. By the way, both of these teams had byes last week. So, of course, the scheduling, the NCAA is going to set it up that way with this huge game. They're going to give both Alabama and Georgia a bye, a rest week coming into this game. So there's no rest advantage one way or the other here, or rest disadvantage one way or the other. But Georgia in that last game, that was ugly, man. That was really ugly. And when I talked about this game, Georgia, they only beat Kentucky by 1 point and only put up 13 points in that game. But I talked about that game. I liked Kentucky to cover the spread, even though I know Georgia was like a 20-something point favorite in that game. I thought that Kentucky was going to have that game circled because Georgia essentially wrecked Kentucky's season last year after Kentucky was off to a 5-0, really hot start. Georgia absolutely smashed them, probably by like 50 points or something last year, and just basically derailed Kentucky's entire season last year. So I think Kentucky really had that game circled, and they really wanted to show up in that game. So I do think that was something that happened in that game. And I think Georgia was looking ahead to this Alabama game because Kentucky, that was a huge game for Kentucky against Georgia. Georgia's biggest game of the season is going to be this game, the huge revenge game against the team that ended their season last year. So I thought Georgia was potentially going to be looking ahead to this game, even though they were going to have a bye week in between them. So I think Georgia really just didn't show up focused in that game against Kentucky. I don't know that you can really take away that much from that final score looking real ugly. I like Georgia in this game against Alabama, man, because I don't think we really know what Alabama actually is either yet under a new coach. Nick Saban's not there anymore. They got DeBoer over from Washington, so they're still trying to adapt to his new schemes and whatever. And yes, they have played well so far. They've put up monster point totals so far. But I think another thing that's going to make the public kind of eye Alabama in this game. And Alabama is actually a home underdog in this game. So it's going to look really enticing, I think, to take Alabama here from the public's perspective because they've been putting up way higher point totals than Georgia has. And the public likes the teams that score, obviously. And because they're getting Alabama plus like a point or a point and a half, an underdog price. Maybe they might be playing the money line too on Alabama at home. So I don't know, man. I don't think you can take away that much from Alabama scoring this many points in some of these. I mean, against Western Kentucky, it's kind of like whatever, even though I know they're an FBS team that is not a bad FBS team, really, but they're never really known for playing good defense at the very least. And their quarterback from last year, Austin, what was his name? I said Austin Hill at one point. It might be Austin Reed. I don't know. It's some 4-letter last name that isn't a swear. He's on the Chicago Bears, I think, on their practice squad right now. So Western Kentucky has had some offensive turnover there, so I don't really know that there's that much that we can gain by looking at what happened in that game. Then Alabama had kind of a misleading result against South Florida. This game was actually a lot closer late in the game. This was a game that was 21-16 with 6:45 left in the game, and then Alabama scored 3 straight touchdowns in the final fewer than 6 minutes to make that score look like a blowout when most of the game really wasn't a blowout. And Alabama kind of struggled there against South Florida, who's an okay team, I guess. And then their most impressive win is this one. They went on the road for a first true road game, and they crushed Wisconsin. But I still think Wisconsin's having some issues right now, man. And this is not the Wisconsin that we remember from several years ago where they were like a really, really good team, smash mouth, great defense. This Wisconsin team, they've had some coaching turnover. They're trying to do different things with their offense. They got, I believe, Van Dyke in their quarterback now from Miami, and I think it's just not working that well for Wisconsin. What they were trying to do last year, they were trying to switch over to more of an air raid attack on offense. That didn't seem to work well either. So I don't know that Wisconsin is really that good, even though, yeah, I mean, you go to Camp Randall, that is still a tough place to play. It is still an impressive win for Alabama. But overall, you know, I tend to want to go with the teams that looked uglier more recently because I think you actually get some value on those teams, and that would be Georgia in this case with that really hideous performance against Kentucky. I like Georgia in this game. It was close to being a bet for me, actually, just because I think the revenge angle is so strong here. Georgia opened 1.5. It looks like it's a road favorite at Alabama. They're sitting at 1 with juice still, so the line hasn't moved a lot. They got 56% of the cash on them, according to these pregame numbers here, and 54% of the tickets on Alabama. So it is telling you that Alabama's a little bit public, but that more of the cash potentially is coming in on Georgia in this one. I've seen some split perspectives from professional bettors on this that I listened to, by the way, like 50-50. Half of them like one side and half of them like the other side. So it's tough to gauge. There isn't really a professional consensus on one side or another on this one. But my situational handicapping and that revenge angle leads me to lean to the Georgia side in that one. Yeah, WKU is pretty bad this year. Yeah. Everybody keeps telling me to get a chick co-host, man. Doc, you're telling me to do that as well. Yeah, I mean, it would be an interesting dynamic, as I keep saying. Like, we do need to shake this up to some extent because it's just me autistically ranting right now. Iowa State, I can talk about Iowa State, I guess. I don't even know who they're playing this week. I looked at it earlier. I looked down the whole card, man. I just don't remember because there are just way too many games to keep in my mind. The slump is not continuing, Doc. I am on a nice run right now. I'm actually, guess what? With that Atlanta Braves win tonight, I am actually in the black this year again. I could still have a losing year, but if I do, it's probably not going to be a really bad one. So I'm actually winning on the year now with that Atlanta Braves win. Oh, man. Houston, you want me to talk about Iowa State? Oh, Iowa State is playing against Houston. All right. Remind me, I'll talk about that game. And then you want me to talk about what? North Dakota State? They're not even on the slate here, right? Because they're an FCS team. I don't know. I don't really talk about FCS, but I will talk about Iowa State. And I will talk about this other ranked game here, which is, what was it? Oh, Illinois-Penn State is the other ranked game. Weird that Illinois is this high in the rankings, man. 19th ranked Illinois, who I think they've been a surprise so far this season, and Penn State is ranked 9, kind of around where they were to start the season. Battle of undefeated Big Ten teams here. This is a big Big Ten matchup. But this is a situation, man, where I think the public is looking at this and thinking, oh, man, we got 2 undefeated teams here. We got 2 ranked teams. These teams aren't separated by that much. And then you look at the market. Yeah, okay. The market's telling you, yeah, that's not the case. Penn State is an 18-point favorite at home. These odds makers are telling you, yeah, maybe Illinois is not as good as their ranking would suggest right now. Maybe they've been kind of using smoke and mirrors a little bit so far here. Penn State, not only are they a massive favorite here, 18, but the public is actually coming in on the underdog. It's a rare situation. You don't see it that often. Maybe like once or twice a week you might see public coming in. I don't think I've ever seen the public come in this heavily on an underdog, really, or at least not for a while, but the public is coming in heavily, taking the points on Illinois. 75% of the tickets, 72% of the cash, though. So I lean to the Penn State side here, man, even though this is only a 47.5 point total, so it's expected to not be a high-scoring game. It looks like Illinois might be struggling to score some points, man, up against this Penn State defense. This is going to be the best defense that Illinois has faced so far this season. I mean, this is a game where you can't trust the rankings, man. The college football rankings, you can always find discrepancies in the rankings. The odds makers will tell you one thing. The rankings will tell you something else. The odds makers are the ones that have huge amounts of money on it, so you got to trust them over what these rankings are. The rankings are just whatever, like coaches' polls. I don't even know how they do it, but Illinois, they're being overrated right now. They've looked too good so far. They are 4-0, like I said, and they beat Kansas when Kansas was ranked. But again, I feel like I've talked about this game a lot. I actually liked the Illinois side in this one because I thought Kansas was overrated coming into this one. It was a tough spot for them going on the road for the first time this season, a true road game. Illinois was able to win the game as a 5-point underdog or so at home. But Kansas, I think, was winning the game earlier in the game. So they did have the upper hand in the game for a while. And Kansas outgained Illinois in the game, and Illinois was +3 in turnovers. So I think this final score was pretty misleading because Illinois was capitalizing on a lot of Kansas mistakes in that one. So perhaps Kansas, with the fact that they outgained them, perhaps Kansas shouldn't have even lost that game. And then Illinois last week, I mean, these were their two big games because I don't think we care about these other games. They beat Eastern Illinois and Central Michigan. I don't think we care about that. Last week, Illinois had a big primetime game at Nebraska that went into overtime. This is their first true road game, and they pulled off an upset. So these two Illinois wins against these ranked teams so far have been upsets as well. Illinois pulled off the upset. I went into that thinking that, well, the market looked like it was indicating on taking the points with Illinois, but I did say that I thought Nebraska was the better team, and I still think they are. And the odds makers were telling you that they were in this game, favoring Nebraska by a decent amount. And in this game, Illinois did outgain Nebraska, but not by that much. I don't know about this game, man. I mean, Nebraska was on the verge of winning this game for most of it, as you can see, Nebraska. But partially because they were the favorite and it was a close game. But Nebraska was winning by 7 points throughout a lot of the game, and then it wound up being tied again going into overtime, and Nebraska lost the game in overtime with Raiola, Nebraska's quarterback, he's the guy who thinks that he's Patrick Mahomes. I don't know if you've seen the videos of this guy, but I think he wears the same number as Mahomes, 15, and he intentionally makes himself look and act as much like Mahomes as possible. I don't even understand why, man. Like, get your own thing. And he was trying to be Mahomes, I think, on that overtime play when they were down 7. They had the possession with the chance to try to tie it, to send it into another overtime. And he made some incorrect decisions there and wound up, I believe, getting sacked on the final play to lose that game in overtime. So trying to be too Mahomes-like maybe when he doesn't quite have the skills to do so. I don't know, but these Illinois wins, I'm not taking that much away from those wins. I like Penn State to cover in this game. If you force me to pick a side in this one, it's not going to be a play for me. Penn State, I mean, they've put up some decent point totals, too, so they've been scoring a decent amount of points this season as well, even though I'm not sure that their offense is really that fantastic, but their defense is probably pretty good again. Odds makers are telling you what you need to know, man. In both of these games, they are. Like, the odds makers are lining Georgia as a favorite on the road at Alabama, too. So the odds makers are telling you that Georgia is, like, basically 4 or 5 points better than Alabama by lining them as a 1-point road favorite. So you can kind of read into it and figure out what's going on there. You have Florida, Illinois. They're a great team, man. I don't know if you saw it. Florida International, they were like a double-digit favorite against FCS Monmouth last week, and they lost to Monmouth. And I think Florida International was down near the Monmouth goal line at the end with a chance to win the game at the end, or they were at the very least in field goal range, losing by 3, and I think they threw an interception right at the end there to lose to Monmouth at home. That Florida-Illinois team, man, they're not very good. Navy, that's actually an interesting game. I'll talk about Navy. Penn State, you don't think they cover? Yeah, I mean, you are asking them to cover a pretty large number as a defense first team with a total that's pretty low. So, I mean, it's not a play for me either, but that's the way I lean if you force me to do that. Raiola's mentored by Mahomes. Well, I don't know why he's like morphing into Mahomes, or at least he seems to think that he is. All right, you want me to talk about Iowa State, Houston for Adam? I don't know what to think about this game, to be honest. Iowa State, I mean, they are a ranked team. They're obviously the better team over Houston. Houston is, I think, going through some turnover, going through some growing pains here. With I think they have a new system there, new coaching maybe, and a lot of new faces on that Houston team. They're kind of rebuilding over the last couple of years. I think they haven't been very good. Iowa State, I mean, they're one of the better teams in their conference. They're up from minus 12.5 to minus 16 on the road, so it does look like there has been some play on Iowa State moving that line up, even though they are really public, 85% of the tickets and only 77% of the cash. So it looks like less of the cash than the tickets on Iowa State is a public road favorite. And I'm rarely going to come in on a public road favorite, man. So it's not going to be a play for me, but it is interesting to me that the line has moved up like 16 points, which has gone through to 16. I mean, from 12.5 to 16, excuse me, it's moved up like 3.5 points through the key number of 14, which is 2 touchdowns. So that is interesting. So it looks like something was causing that line to move. And when it moves like that, it's either going to be actual like professional play in the market, or it's going to be because there was some personnel change, and I'm not in tune enough with what's going on in this game to know if there are injuries or anything like that, or somebody's coming back or anything like that, so I don't really know. I can look at the situation here. Iowa State ranked 18th in the country, by the way. I mean, there isn't that much to really look at here as far as, I mean, we're only in week 4, and conference play is just starting, so you got a lot of situations where teams played some pretty easy games. Iowa State has one big game that they had so far where they beat Iowa on the road in that big rivalry game, which is a close game. It was a close match. I think those two teams are pretty evenly matched as well. So that was the one big win that they had. They're not coming off of any big game. I mean, there isn't really much to say about the situation at all, really. So it really comes down to, it really comes down to like power. This is one of those games where, because the situation doesn't really put you on one side or the other, you got to look at like power ratings and stuff. I mean, it's certainly not a game that I'm going to play, as I said. Houston's coming off getting absolutely blown out by Cincinnati, and they may be a little bit pissed off about that. I mean, Houston, when their skill level just isn't there, there's not that much that they can do. But Houston and Cincinnati, I think, have a little bit of a rivalry going on there just because they both joined the Big 12 at the same time. They both moved up to the big boy conference at the same time. So I do think there is a little bit of a rivalry there just for that reason. They're kind of like sibling rivalry brothers as the Big 12 newcomers there from, I believe, last season was when they moved up. So Houston, I mean, the fact that they got absolutely annihilated and shut out 34-0, I do think that's got to refocus them a little bit. And I don't want to say they were looking ahead to Iowa State, though, because you got to think they were focused on a game against Cincinnati, like I said, because they do have that rivalry there, and it was the start of conference play for them, but they just got their asses handed to them. So you might expect Houston to play a better game than that, because that was just such a bad game. So probably, I don't see this being a situation where you're going to get any value laying those points with Iowa State on the road. I will say that. And I don't know if there's like a bye involved or anything like that. I haven't really looked at all these schedules that in detail necessarily. Iowa State did have a bye, but it was before their most recent game against Arkansas State, where they crushed Arkansas State. But I do think Arkansas State was coming off kind of hanging with Michigan in the big house. Iowa State's QB'd. Is their QB, what, he came back or something? Because they've moved up in the line. I don't know. Praxiomatically, you mean praxeologically? What's up, JC? What's going on, guys? I don't see, I do see JC. What's up, guys? All right. Navy, I actually do have a lean on the Navy game, and it is, I think I do. Do I remember this correctly? I think I lean against Navy, I believe, in this one, even though Navy is actually up from pick'em to 4.5. It looks like, I don't know when this was a pick'em, but they're at the point where they're laying 4.5 on the road at UAB in this early start time, 12 noon, 82% of the tickets on the very public Navy side there. So they're another very public road favorite. And this one, 84% of the cash. So that's not a huge cash discrepancy there. It's not one that I bat an eye at and think, oh, there's actually like a significant amount of cash coming in opposing the public in this one. I don't think that that is the case here. But, well, Yeah, I mean, it also doesn't indicate to me that there's a lot of cash coming in on the Navy side either, as far as like the professional bettors. I don't think that they're coming in on the Navy side either in this one. And situationally, I lean against Navy. I actually think this is a sandwich spot because Navy, this is a pretty big game usually between Navy and Memphis. I think it's kind of become a little bit of an in-conference rivalry game to some extent. That was a big game, and it was a barn burner of a game, man, where Navy beat Memphis 56-44 last week. A game with a ton of scoring where teams are going up and down the field like that. It was within 5 points in the final minute and a half there, within the final minute. A game where both teams put up massive amounts of offense. It looks like it may have been a little bit of a misleading win for Navy, too, because Memphis was -1 in the turnover margin, and Memphis had 11 more first downs than Navy, and they had almost 100 more total yards than Navy. So in a way, Memphis actually outplayed Navy in that game. Either way, it was a big game for Navy, man. And Memphis was an 8.5-point favorite on the road in that game, too. And Navy was able to pull off the home upset in front of their home crowd there. So that was a big game for Navy there. And now they're going out on the road. First true road game, by the way. The first true road game of a season tends to not be a great spot, really, for a team having to go out on the road for the first time after you've been at home the whole season. So that's not great either. And who do they have up next week? This is a sandwich spot, man, because they're coming off a pretty big game over Memphis. They could have overlooked UAB in a spot like this because up next they have one of their rival service academies, Air Force. They have to go on the road and play at Air Force next week. So I think this is a bad spot for Navy, so I would only lean to the UAB side. UAB also has a bye coming into this game. I believe they had a bye last week, so UAB has a little bit of a rest advantage here too because they were just resting while Navy was playing that ridiculously high-scoring game against Memphis. Although, however, UAB, in their last game when we last saw them, this is a game where I won on UAB plus the points. That was one of my plays on Better Off Dead. Winner. UAB was playing against Arkansas, and UAB actually went on the road. They actually had 2 straight road games in there, so they were playing a second straight road game, but Arkansas was in a bad spot. I think they had that sandwiched in between Oklahoma State and some other big game, probably the start of SEC play or something. So I fired on UAB there, and UAB was able to come within the number and cover the spread there against Arkansas. But UAB played a tough game against Arkansas, so that was a big opponent for them, an SEC game. So they went into the bye off of that. So they were off of a big game, but they were off of 2 straight losses, and the one before that was ridiculously ugly, and I talked about it when I talked about the Arkansas game. That was a very misleading result where UAB, I think, had a lot of turnovers in that game, and the game was not what the final score made it look. So UAB, are they going to use that bye to kind of focus on this game because they went into that bye with 2 straight losses? Maybe. But like I said, they went in coming off of their biggest game of the year, really, against an SEC team, so maybe that will have a little bit of some sort of hangover effect lasting through the bye too. So I could see that bye going either way. I could see the bye being bye. It's a bye. So I don't know how to gauge that bye actually for UAB, but I do lean to the UAB side in that one. Whatever. What do you mean whatever? I don't think Iowa State's going to lose that game. But I'm just going by what I do, man. I'm going by my handicapping, how I handicap these games. But that game was not a strong handicap for me on that one, the way that I do this. Iowa State's QB's dad went to West Virginia, so bet the farm and then to cover. Yeah, I won't be doing that. I think West Virginia's off this week, right? I went down all these games. I didn't see West Virginia in there. I think they have a bye. Speaking of buys, let's get to my plays, man. What are we? We're 33 minutes in, so this is going to be an hour about instead of an hour and a half. We'll start with the other ranked matchup that I skipped. We're skipping the ranked matchups, man. Just like I skipped the pussy. Kansas State -5 is going to be my first play. This is one that was being talked about in that Better Off Dead chat, where I said I liked Kansas State, and it has risen to the point where I'm going to make a play on it. I know there are a lot of professionals on Kansas State. It might be one of the plays that has the most professional action on, which kind of worries me a little bit because I like being on the side of the pros. I like the fact that I agree with them on this. I'm saying I'm not a professional, obviously. I'm only a semi-professional at this, but I do like it when I look at something and I think about it a certain way, and then a bunch of professionals come in and they actually happen to agree with me on it independently. So I think that's like confirmation that, yeah, you're like doing something right here. So I should like it when a lot of the professionals are on it, but it does seem like when too many of the professionals are all on that same side, sometimes it doesn't work out that well. But I don't even know because I haven't really kept track of what the record is on games like that. Maybe they do still win overall, but generally, yeah, I think I do want to agree with the professionals rather than being against them. This is one of the big professional plays of the week, Kansas State. I'm on it as well. It has risen to that level for me. Let's look at what's going on in this game. Kansas State, they're up against Oklahoma State. So this is that other ranked matchup. It's at noon. By the way, I think 3 of my 4 plays are actually at noon. So it's going to be an early Saturday for me where I'm not playing any of the late night games. Usually I have some games like at night and I'm waiting to see how my day was. This is either going to be really good or really bad, all clustered at noon, basically. I have 3 noon games and one 3:30 p.m. game. Oklahoma State's ranked 20th. Kansas State ranked 23rd. Both have 1 loss. They're both 3-1 teams. Looking at the market on this one, Kansas State has moved up a little bit from 5 to 5.5 with juice, or 5 with juice, excuse me. There's still 5s out there, 5s and 5.5s everywhere. Not much of a difference between 5 and 5.5. Not a key number. It's basically in no man's land. It's just been sitting there. 67% of the tickets are on Kansas State, so it does look like they're a little bit public, which it kind of surprises me that they're as public as they are in a game that is a ranked matchup. So again, I think the public in a lot of these ranked matchups tends to kind of want to play the underdog in matchups like this because they perceive it as being like a pretty close matchup, and they think the points tend to be value, or taking like the money line on that underdog is a little bit more value because it's a close matchup. Here we do see 70% of the cash on Kansas State as well. Like I said, I've already confirmed through like listening to a bunch of professionals talk about this and stuff that they're basically all leaning to the Kansas State side in this one, and I am in agreement on that. Oh, God, it slipped down to 69%, 69%. But I do think that there is actual professional money, legitimate money on the Kansas State side here based on listening to the pros talk about this one, and I will talk about the situation because I agreed with it when I first broke this game down as well. I think it's a bad spot for Oklahoma State, first of all. Not a great spot, at least, even though, yes, this is a ranked matchup. This is their first conference road game at the very least, and their only other road game was going to Tulsa, which that's not an unfamiliar environment for them because Oklahoma State, Tulsa, I think they play basically every year because they're kind of like an in-state rivalry game, but it's a rivalry game where Oklahoma State obviously dominates the series, and Tulsa tries to step up and tries to play well against their big brother there, and Tulsa not very good this year and did not do anything in that game. So I'm not really going to read into that game very much. Oklahoma State, I will tell you, I will read into this game a little bit. This 2-overtime win against Arkansas a couple weeks back looked like a big win because, hey, they beat an SEC team in Arkansas. Arkansas is only an okay SEC team. But I've mentioned this game on multiple of my college breakdowns, man. This final result was completely misleading. Arkansas absolutely dominated this game, dude. Statistically, look at this. Look at the statistics in this game. Arkansas put up almost 300 more yards than Oklahoma State. They put up 648 yards against Oklahoma State. And I mean, Arkansas does have a pretty good offense, but still, that is an indictment of Oklahoma State's defense, man. I don't think this defense is very good if they allow that to happen. And Arkansas had 3 turnovers in the game, and that's kind of what led to Oklahoma State being able to stay in the game. Arkansas also dominated the first downs, dominated the time of possession, total domination by Arkansas statistically, and Oklahoma State was able to hang around. They had a pick 6 here, as you can see. I don't know what the other turnovers were, but man. And then it went into double overtime, and Oklahoma State won in double overtime. Misleading final result there, man, where Oklahoma State actually played significantly worse in that game than what it looked like on the scoreboard. And then last week they lost to Utah, which was a big game, man. That was a physical battle, and I think they had a much more intense game last week than Kansas State did, because Kansas State was a game that I played on, and Kansas State's game was over like really quickly. Utah against Oklahoma State, that was a big game last week for Oklahoma State, man, between 2 ranked opponents, and now they're having to face another ranked opponent right after that. And Oklahoma State, man, They got pounded physically. Utah is one of the only teams in the Big 12 that plays physically, which they were one of the only Pac-12 teams that played physically. They have a physical defense. They can run the ball. They can throw it around a bit too. That was a game where, they can beat you up physically, and I think they did that to Oklahoma State. So coming off that game, Oklahoma State could be a little bit physically messed up coming into this game. So I don't think it's a good spot, even though they did put up some garbage time touchdowns at the end. But I think Utah might have just kind of taken their foot off the gas at that point, and it wound up looking a little bit dicey at the end. But the game, I don't think, was actually as close as the final score looked. Utah completely shredded Oklahoma State on the box score there statistically. I mean, look at this. Oklahoma State only had 11 first downs. They only had 285 yards. I mean, Utah does play pretty good defensively, but still not a good performance at all. And again, Oklahoma State's defense really struggled in this game. 456 yards from Utah. Utah lost the turnover battle, which might have helped Oklahoma State make the game look a little bit closer than it was as well. Utah dominated the first downs. They completely dominated. Look at the time of possession, dude. 42-17. That's insane. That is complete domination by Utah. They were possessing the ball the entire game. It was one of my leans, by the way. I talked about this game just because it was a ranked matchup on the show. I leaned to Utah in that game, so got that one right. Didn't bet it, though. But these Oklahoma State, those two big games that they played, those two good opponents they played, they got completely outmanned in both of those games, dude. So I don't think Oklahoma State is really this good. I don't know if they're good enough to justify the ranking that they have, man. Because they face these two actual big conference opponents, and they make it look close on the scoreboard, and they win one of the two games, but they got absolutely dominated in those two games. And let's take it a little bit further. Utah's starting quarterback didn't even play in this game. Cam Rising, who was out with a hand injury, he didn't even play in this game. Isaac Wilson played in this game, and he didn't have a good game. He threw 2 interceptions, a pick 6. Didn't do well in this game, but Utah absolutely wrecked them on the ground, obviously. Tons of rushing yards, 249 rushing yards in the game. Oklahoma State, this defense can't stop any of these offenses, man. That is what you can take away from this. I'm going to be on Kansas State, and then let's look at the Kansas State side of this thing. Kansas State, they're coming off a massively embarrassing loss, and this is a horrible spot for Kansas State. I was on BYU last week, another winner on Better Off Dead, baby. I only talk about my winners. No, I've been doing pretty well recently, but that was a nice win. Kansas State, terrible spot. They were coming off a big primetime win over then-ranked Arizona, which was the start of Big 12 play. Huge game, and they absolutely destroyed Arizona. Then they had to go out on the road to BYU, which I believe is a place where Kansas State hadn't played there for a long time. BYU just came into this conference not that long ago, so that was an unfamiliar venue for Kansas State to have to go out in. It's high elevation there in Utah. Absolutely not a good spot for Kansas State. And they had Oklahoma State coming up next. So that was sandwiched in between two ranked opponents. They had to go out to BYU. And I'm pretty sure BYU was coming off an ugly game as well. So BYU was in a good bounce back spot there. And BYU was able to get that win. And they look like they killed Kansas State on the scoreboard, but that wasn't really actually the case. If you look at the statistics here, Kansas State actually outgained BYU by more than 100 yards, and BYU beat them 38-9. Kansas State outpossessed them by 7 minutes, out first down them by 3 first downs, and outgained them by 120-something yards. I mean, does this box score look like it was a game where Kansas State lost by almost 30? No, it does not. Kansas State allowed 3 turnovers. BYU, I think, had at least 2 defensive and special teams touchdowns. They had a fumble return touchdown. They had a 90-yard punt return touchdown, which happened right when I turned the game back on up here, right when I was starting to do my NFL video last week. You saw me watching this game during my NFL video, so this is a completely misleading final result, man. I mean, this game was close, basically almost going into halftime. Kansas State was winning the game 6-3, so it was a really bad spot for Kansas State, and Kansas State actually outplayed BYU on the score, on the box score, on the statistics in the game, and just not on the scoreboard. And the scoreboard is completely misleading. I'm not saying that my bet was bad. I don't think it was. I think I nailed the situation correctly. Kansas State made a ton of mistakes, and BYU only had to cover a +7 in that one. And they covered by many, many points in that one. So the final score looks incredibly misleading in that one. So that's a play on Kansas State. Talking way too long just on Kansas State for the first play there. Kansas State -5, baby. That's play number 1. What's up, guys? Oh my God. I'm running out of steam here, man. I've been working all week. I get no sleep on weeknights, weekdays, I get up, I do better off dead. I analyze all the baseball, do better off dead, talk about baseball, go to work all day, come home, don't sleep. Oh man. And then I'm having to do this tonight, talking to everybody here. All right. Next up, this is a sandwich spot. I'm playing Minnesota +10.5, and this one feels real ugly as Minnesota has been. I'm playing on the Minnesota side here. Oh, my God. Michigan sitting at 10, up a little bit to 10 with juice. There are 10.5s out there right now. You can get the 10.5. Michigan's public, 63% of the tickets on Michigan, but 71% of the cash looks like it's on Michigan. Kind of worries me a little bit, even though I think we could say Michigan is public after what they did last week. The public bettors are not going to be coming in on playing Minnesota here, that's for sure. 71% of the cash on Michigan does worry me a little bit, and the fact that the line's moved up a little bit, but we're getting more value on the Minnesota side here, and I like the Minnesota side in this one. Michigan, I mean, they're ranked 12. We know what the deal is with Michigan. They are the defending national champs, but their team is completely turned over. I think they've only returned like 6 starting players from last year, and their coach is obviously in the NFL now. Again, Harbaugh over in California again. So Michigan having to completely turn it over, but I think they're in a bad spot. I think they're actually in a sandwich spot, and they're certainly in a letdown spot because Michigan, they hadn't been playing that well. They've been playing kind of ugly, and they went into this game up against a really public USC team. The public liked USC in this game a lot more. USC had been putting up way better offensive statistics, so the public liked USC better, but Michigan, I think they're the better defensive team than USC, man. I mean, I know they are. USC's defense is actually pretty bad. Michigan's defense is not bad. It's actually pretty good, and Michigan was able to pull off the win at home and upset, getting like 5 points at home. I mentioned that game on my show last week. It was one of the ranked matchups, so I talked about it last week, and I got the lean right on that one too. It was close to being a play for me. I mentioned the game. I leaned to the Michigan side in that one. I thought it was a bad spot for USC, which it was. I thought Michigan was getting way too many points at home with the better defense, and Michigan was actually, they had a little bit of a spark on offense coming into this game because I always forget the guy's name, but Michigan, their quarterback to start out the season was a pocket passing quarterback, and Michigan was trying to go with that approach. They realized that it wasn't working, and they decided to switch it up and go with more focus on the rushing attack, but also put in a running quarterback, a scrambling quarterback, a dual threat quarterback, which is Alex Orji, I believe is his name. One of you guys in the chat mentioned him last week because his name is so ridiculous. Orji got into the game last week, and it was basically an orgy, or they're at least probably partying after that game was over in the big house, man. I'm assuming the fact that he runs a lot and his name is Orgy, it means he was running a lot of naked bootlegs probably. They were able to win with that spark of having Orgy there at quarterback. I think he didn't do that badly, and Michigan was able to pull off the win. Big win over USC, man. Coming off of that, and they're staying at home, I think they could be just kind of sitting there basking in that win. I don't think they're going to pay that much attention to a Minnesota team that's down near the bottom of the Big Ten, and they have not been really one of the better teams in the Big Ten for who knows how long, even though they were a bowl team last year, but half of this conference gets into bowls, so I don't think that really matters more than half, because look who Michigan has up next, though. Oh, yeah, it's the rematch of the championship game, even though I know both Washington and Michigan have had a lot of turnover, and these teams are completely different this year than they were last year. But still, the programs are still the same. They're still the same schools. They're still the same programs, Michigan and Washington. So I think Michigan knows that Washington's going to be looking at big-time revenge there, and that was part of what I said about the game tonight with Washington. I didn't like I heard a lot of professional bettors taking the points with Washington tonight, and they pushed if they got the better number, the +3 tonight. But I didn't like the Washington side very much tonight because I thought Washington was in a major look ahead to this huge revenge game for them up against Michigan. It's revenge. It's championship revenge for Washington coming up, man. It's the championship rematch, and Washington is now in the Big Ten, so it's now a Big Ten matchup, which may be becoming a Big Ten rivalry. Who knows? But I think Michigan could be looking ahead to that because they know Washington's going to be gunning for them, and that's a bigger game, man. But mostly, I think it's a letdown spot. So I do think it's a sandwich spot because the look ahead is there to Washington. I think it was a stronger look ahead from Washington's perspective. I think it was a worse look ahead. But still, I think it's a look ahead from Michigan. And again, I think the letdown is just huge here because I think this is what we call the legitimizer game, man, in college football. When you start off the season and you're like kind of a new team like Michigan and people don't know what to expect from you. They don't know who you are yet. You don't know who you are yet. You get that first big win over a ranked team, you're going to be celebrating that win, man, and maybe too much so. And I think you're ripe for a letdown coming off of that. When you come out of that game, you have to play a lesser opponent who you might not focus on as much, which would be Minnesota here. So I like the Minnesota side for all those reasons. And Minnesota, I think you might be getting a few extra points on the Minnesota side here because they've looked really ugly this season so far, especially against the two big conference teams that they played. They only were able to put up 17 points against UNC. And this is a UNC team that just gave up 70 points to James Madison last week. This is a UNC defense that sucks horribly. And Minnesota was only able to put up 17 points against them. So that looks bad, but I would also maybe put an asterisk next to that a little bit just because that was the first game of the season. So maybe the teams started a little bit slow. They were slow to start. I don't think Minnesota's offense is very good by any means, but still, their offense was able to start getting going a little bit in these next games. But it was against Rhode Island, an FCS team, and Nevada, who is an FBS team, but a really bad one. But one thing you can take away from that maybe is that Minnesota shut them both out. So I think Minnesota's defense has been playing pretty well, or at least they were up until this Iowa game, which that does worry me a little bit as far as trying to gauge Minnesota's defense is concerned because Iowa doesn't have a great offense. Their offense was miserable last year. I think it's a little bit better this year, but the fact that Iowa put up 31 in Minnesota does kind of concern me a little bit, but still, Minnesota, I do think they play defense decently, and the fact that they put up 14, I mean, Iowa's defense is really, really good. Iowa, they were one of the best defensive teams in college football last year, and a lot of those guys are back, so Iowa's defense is still good. So I'm not going to really slam Minnesota for only putting up 14 points against Iowa. I mean, Iowa, like I said, their defense, very, very good. They crush you. And yes, this is a first road game for Minnesota, and yes, they are going to the Big House, so I am a little bit concerned about that, but I do expect Minnesota to be focused because they're coming off of a really bad loss at home. So I think going out on the road actually helps teams in a spot like that. When you have a really bad game at home, you get embarrassed at home. I think the last thing you want to do is sit around at home and have to listen to the home fans talk about how bad you are and whatever. I think the best thing for you is actually to get out on the road, maybe go into a bye, but to get out on the road and just not focus on that. And you can actually focus on football. And I do think Minnesota is going to be focused because they are playing the defending national champs here, Michigan. So the question I don't think is going to be Minnesota's motivation here or Minnesota's focus here. I think Michigan's motivation is definitely in question, as I just pointed out. And you're asking them to cover a big number here. So I would say that Minnesota, I mean, the worry here would be, is Minnesota, skill-wise, are they good enough to be able to cover this number against a potentially disinterested Michigan team? And I'm saying that they will be. The other thing that I like about this is that this is a ridiculously low total, man. So the odds makers don't think that much of Minnesota's offense. They probably think pretty highly of Michigan's defense, but they're also kind of telling you Minnesota's defense is probably not that bad, or that Michigan's offense might not be that great, because this total is down from 40 to 35, juiced to the under, and it's continuing to go lower. Expected to be a low-scoring game, and the market looks like it's all over the under, with 69% of the tickets on the over, and 70% of the cash, however, on the under. So when you take points, you're taking double-digit points here in a game with a total that's that low. That also means you're getting more value per point, man, because I mention this every time I'm taking underdogs in football. When you have a really low total, that is extremely low for a college football game. It means that every point is worth a little bit more, man. Even though the odds makers are going to try to set the spread kind of based on where the total is, but sometimes they can't because they're two kind of independent markets in a way. So they can't really completely do that, which is why a lot of times they won't let you bet a correlated parlay, meaning that like taking like a big underdog is correlated to the game going under the point total for, I think, obvious reasons. If it's a lower scoring game, it's going to be easier for that underdog to cover a big spread. So a lot of books just won't even allow you to make that parlay on the same game. Like if you want to take Minnesota plus the points in this case and take the under 35 or whatever and parlay them because they're correlated, the books might not even let you do that because there is actually such an advantage. If you're right about the spread bet there, you're probably also going to be right about it being a very low-scoring game. But I like the fact that it's a low total. So for those reasons, I think it makes those points worth a little bit more. It does make those points worth a little bit more if it's a low total. Points are going to be a lot harder to come by, and you're taking double-digit points there. Minnesota plus 10.5 there. What's up, Gabe? You love me in Tower Gang? Thank you, dude. What's up, man? Heffalumps, you're chilling? I'm trying to chill. I feel like I have a lot of like wild energy right now. And this is going to go a little bit longer than an hour here, man, because I still got 2 plays to talk about. Let's get to it, man. Baylor, -3. And, thanks for liking me on Tower Gang, man. That's kind of what I'm known for, right, Tower Gang? I'm less funny on this show. I'm just spurging out on this show, basically. I'm going to play Baylor -3 up against BYU, by the way. So I'm playing both ends of that BYU-Kansas State matchup from last week, which was a game that I won on. You'll see me do that with the way that my handicapping works, the way that my mind works. Sometimes I'll like have a spot one week where a team's in a bad spot. I'll go against them. Then if that bet works out, that team that I was on in that game had like a big game in that game, and now they're going to be in a letdown the next game, so I'll go against them the very next week. So you'll see me doing that a lot, kind of zigzagging on teams involved like in the same matchups, like going with one team one week against them the next, or against one team one week and then on them the next. So I was against Kansas State last week. I'm on them this week. I was on BYU last week, and for basically the very same reasons, I'm going to be against them this week and playing on the Baylor side. Baylor's still sitting at 3, although it looks like it's gone up a little bit to 3 with juice. I think the 3s are still out there. You can find them around. 63% of the cash, baby, on Baylor, and 60% of the tickets are actually on BYU because Baylor, they're kind of a down program right now, man. They were good in the Big 12 for a while, but for the last couple of years, they have not been a very good Big 12 team. And I think they've missed out on bowls a couple of years in a row now, too. So public is just not on the Baylor side anymore. They like what they've seen out of BYU. And I think a lot of this is recency bias, man, with the public coming into the tune of 60% on the BYU side. It's a fade of Baylor from the public's perspective, but they're also liking BYU. Oh, and guess what? BYU, they just got into the rankings. BYU is now ranked 22nd entirely because they beat a ranked Kansas State team and crushed them 38-9. Is BYU actually a top 25 team? Probably not. I would have to look at the power ratings again, but I think that they're probably a bit over-ranked now. And this is a situation like I talked about with Northern Illinois a couple weeks, or last week, I guess, right? When I faded Northern Illinois. When you have a team that isn't in the rankings that often, even though the BYU is in the Big 12 now, so they are one of the big boys now. So they'll probably be in the rankings certainly more often than Northern Illinois will be. But when you have a team that's not in the rankings that often and they get into the rankings for the first time this season, and they just crack in, and maybe they don't actually belong there, and maybe they're coming off of a misleading result, and maybe a big effort, big win, where they might be in a letdown spot after that. Yeah, they tend to be in a spot where they get a little bit too high on themselves for all those reasons, and it's kind of just a cluster of a letdown spot there, and I think that's going to be what we see out of BYU here. They're having to travel on the road again. This is their third true road game, actually. So they have been on the road a lot, and they've done well on the road. They upset SMU on the road early in the season as a double-digit dog, and they beat Wyoming, but Wyoming has not been playing well. Unfortunately, I lost a play. I am talking about one of my losses. I lost on Wyoming in that game, full disclosure. I thought it was a bad spot for BYU, coming off a big upset and having that huge game against Kansas State up next. BYU in a bad spot still played well against Wyoming, or maybe Wyoming just sucks. But now something's got to give, man. BYU, they're undefeated now. Now they're going out on the road for their first conference road game, at least, which is against Baylor. It's not an easy place to play, really, even if Baylor is a bit of a down program. So BYU, I think they're in a letdown spot for those reasons. And I actually think that you could argue they're in a sandwich spot because Baylor is so down near the bottom of the conference. BYU, I mean, they're in a letdown, obviously. That was a huge game coming off the Kansas State game, but also they have Arizona up next, who's a better Big 12 team and was good in the Pac-12 last year. And Arizona just dropped out of the rankings recently. So I think they might maybe pay more attention to this Arizona game and then Oklahoma State coming up after that. They actually have a bye before the Arizona State game, so they'll be going into a bye after this. And maybe they're even looking forward to a bye, maybe thinking, hey, we're coming off a big win. We have an easier game now, and then we can go rest, and then we play a bigger game again after that. So BYU, for those reasons, again, they could overlook Baylor. And then I don't know if I have to reiterate it. This is what I just talked about with Kansas State. This was a completely misleading result, even though BYU, yeah, I mean, I think they did step it up, and they did play well in this game, but still, Kansas State played horribly. They outgained BYU, as I said, and BYU capitalized on 3 turnovers in the game. I won't rehash it for too long here. Very misleading results. So off of that result, the fact that BYU got outstatted in the game and they had a big turnover discrepancy in their favor in that game, that means they're going to be probably overvalued coming into this one, man. That was a misleading final result. They look better than they actually are. And Baylor, on the other hand, I mean, they've looked ugly so far, but have they really, though? Because, I mean, they beat who they were supposed to beat. They beat Tarleton State, an FCS team. Who cares? They beat Air Force. I think Air Force is pretty down this year, though. But still, holding Air Force to 3 points, having to face the triple option, I mean, I don't think it's that easy to do that, even if Air Force is the weakest of the service academies this season, and I think they may be. I mean, Army is looking very good this year. Baylor actually played Utah pretty close on the road, and that was the game where Cam Rising got hurt in the game, but he played like at least 3/4 of that game, I think. So Baylor was facing Utah's starting quarterback in that game, Cam Rising, and Baylor played competitively in that game, more or less. So, I mean, that shows you something. They had to go on the road. That's not an easy task to do, and it's a Utah team that just joined the Big 12, I think. So that, like, maybe was it last year or was it this year? I guess it was this year, right? Because they were in the Pac-12. So that game, an early Big 12 game there, not easy for Baylor to go out there to an unfamiliar environment like that and actually play the game that close. So I don't think that was actually a bad performance. And then, yeah, I mean, last week they had to go into high elevation again. So 2 high elevation games there, and played Colorado, and they lost to Colorado in overtime. Really ugly. Baylor was winning the game by multiple scores, I think, in the middle of this game. I think Baylor might have been up 2 touchdowns. They were still winning at the half. They wound up losing in overtime. Baylor right here, they're up 24-10 and wound up blowing the lead. I think Baylor actually kind of outplayed, or no, they didn't outplay Colorado. Never mind, my mistake. I thought they had outplayed Colorado. Colorado did outgain them in the game, but still, Baylor, they were very close to winning this game. They were on the verge of winning this game. They had a touchdown lead with 18 seconds left in the game and then gave it up and then lost in overtime. Does that mean they're going to be in a hangover spot because of that? I don't really think so, man. I mean, against Colorado, I mean, do you get up that much for a game against Colorado? Maybe just because it's Coach Prime, Deion Sanders, and they're so overhyped, and you're playing against his son, Shadur Sanders or whatever. So, yeah, I mean, I guess maybe teams will get up for that, but I think BYU is in the much bigger letdown spot here, man. I think it's much more significant than whatever hangover spot Baylor might be coming in. Baylor might be in coming off of this. And Baylor, I mean, it's not a spot where they're going to be unfocused here. Oh, crap. Did I move the tab? What did I do? Oh, yeah. Never mind. Yeah, I thought I moved the tab. I just switched over. I had StreamYard up again. Oh, crap. Yeah, Baylor. I mean, I think that Baylor is going to be I don't think they're going to be unfocused in this game. Like, BYU may very well be unfocused to play a lowly Baylor team here, coming off such a much bigger game here, whereas Baylor, they have a ranked BYU team coming into their house, man. I think they're thankful that they're not having to go too high elevation again and play BYU on the road here. But Baylor, I do expect them to be focused on a ranked team, especially coming off a loss. I expect them to be focused there with ranked BYU coming in. So I'm on Baylor. -3. And it's also one of those spots where, again, it's another odds maker versus ranking discrepancy where the public's going to come in on the team that they see, oh, BYU is ranked against Baylor, who's unranked, and you're getting points with the ranked team here? Oh, well, give me that. That's what the public is going to say. And this was an angle that works out a lot, and it worked out really well in college basketball this past season when you had a ranked road underdog up against an unranked home favorite. That home favorite was cashing at a nice rate in basketball, and the same thing applies here, man. It's just that the people who make the rankings don't exactly know what they're doing, and the odds makers are telling you what to actually think here. And they're telling you that the people who make the rankings are actually not totally accurate. They're telling you that these teams are actually almost like evenly matched, lining this basically with just Baylor's home field advantage here. So this is one of those games, man, where what the odds makers are telling you differs from what the rankings are telling you. The odds makers have more on the line than the rankings makers do, and they know more. They're better at assessing the value of these teams. So it's one of those cases, man, where it's the rankings, the odds clash with the rankings, and the odds look suspect, basically. And I'm going to lay the points with Baylor in that one for all those reasons. And then we'll finish it out with what was the first play that I made of the week. My favorite play of the week is Auburn +2, and I'm going to apologize in advance that the +2 is not out there anymore. They were at +2.5, I think, at one point. They were +2 all the way up until, I think, Wednesday or Thursday, and then the line started moving, man. And I actually called it correctly. I said that I thought there was going to be so much cash, like legitimate professional money and actual respected money coming in on the Auburn side in this one because of the spot. I said that Auburn was going to flip to a favorite in this game and go off the favorite, and I was correct, it looks like, unless we see it start moving back. But at the very least, what we can say, so I was right about that. I was able to get the +2 on Auburn, but what I will say is that there isn't that much of a difference, even though it went through the 0. All these numbers that are between the 2.5s, like between the two field goals, those numbers are less key. So you're still really just basically asking the team to win the game in football. So there isn't that much of a difference. So I am still saying that I think it's probably okay to play Auburn at the I think you can still get -1s out there right now. They flipped from +2.5 to -1.5, but with reduced juice. So I think there were -1s. I think maybe there are still some pick'ems out there, but if anything, you might still be able to find a money line that's a nice price on Auburn. You might be able to find money line like -115 out there on Auburn. So literally just play them to win the game. So I think that would be a fine way to play this game as well. But I really don't hate playing Auburn at the -1.5 either, really. Like, I actually still kind of like it. In my opinion, I think Auburn should win this game based on my situational handicap here. This is up against Oklahoma, and this is another one where that Auburn has flipped to the favorite. You actually have an unranked home favorite up against a ranked road underdog again in this one, so I'm playing 2 of them, baby. Let's go. Yeah, the odds makers are disagreeing with the rankings once again here. Oklahoma is extremely public, 72% of the tickets and only 54% of the cash on them. So you have Oklahoma actually a public ranked road favorite up against a team that's obviously getting more of the cash versus where the public is and is flipped to the favorite and is unranked. So versus an unranked anti-public home favorite here. I really like Auburn in this game, and this is the first spot of the week that I identified. Oklahoma, they're ranked 21st. They're in a bad spot, dude. They're coming off a big emotional get-up game against Tennessee, ranked 6th in the country. That was also the college game day game last week where I mentioned it on my show. I thought that was the college game day game. Yes, I also leaned to Oklahoma in that game. I got it wrong. Oklahoma did not cover the spread. And they actually, I think, scored the final score in the game to make it closer than the score was prior to that. But still, it was a big emotional game, and a game that you really get up emotionally for when college game day is at your place in Norman, Oklahoma. You're hosting a team that's been crazy good offensively in Tennessee, and they're coming to your house. And Oklahoma's defense did pretty well in that game, holding a really powerful Tennessee offense to 25 points. Not a bad performance from Oklahoma, really. But for all those reasons, Oklahoma's got to be in a big hangover / letdown spot here because you get up so much for that game, big game, and then you also didn't play that badly, even though, like I said, Oklahoma was down 25-9 before they scored that final touchdown there. Oklahoma still played pretty tough in that game. Oklahoma still stepped it up defensively, so you know that means they played physically on defense in that game, which is what I mentioned. That's why I liked Oklahoma to cover in that game. They didn't quite get there, but Oklahoma, I said that they were going to be the more physical defense out of the two teams, and that Tennessee's offense might actually struggle a bit against a defense that physical. Although they do play a bunch of physical defenses in the SEC too. Tennessee is one of the defenses that is less physical. So Oklahoma, even though they're now in the SEC as well, a newcomer to the SEC, they actually have more of like an SEC-style defense than Tennessee does. But either way, what I'm saying is Oklahoma played a really tough, emotionally high, physical game there against Tennessee. And then who do they have up next? Well, they actually have a bye next. So they might be even like looking forward to that bye, maybe like looking forward to get some rest there after playing that physical game there last week. Who do they have up next? The newly ranked number 1 team, Texas, which is also a massive rivalry game. Oklahoma and Texas, that's the Red River rivalry game, man. The Red River shootout, old school rivalry. It's a rivalry that continues as Oklahoma and Texas have both moved over into the SEC now as well. So those rivals moved over from the Big 12 into the SEC with each other. That is a massive game. That's one of the biggest games on Oklahoma's schedule. And by the way, they're going to be in a sandwich spot against South Carolina after that game, too, with Ole Miss up after that, who is probably one of the best teams in the country, too. So look ahead for that one. I might wind up having a play on South Carolina in that one, depending on how this all shakes out. But we're looking at Auburn in this one. This is a sandwich spot for Oklahoma, man. Like I said, coming up the huge game against Tennessee and with a huge game against Texas up next on the schedule. That's going to be one of their biggest games of the year. They might be looking forward to getting this rest there, the rest of having the bye up next. I think they could overlook Auburn, and this is their first road game of the season, and they're a newcomer to the SEC, so they're not used to playing War Eagle, man. They're not used to going to Auburn and having to play in Auburn's house. Auburn, they're going to show up, man. For a ranked Oklahoma team that's new to the SEC, the crowd is going to show up for this game, man. Coming into with Oklahoma coming into their house there, I expect it to be a packed game for Auburn, even though it's not a night game, so that mitigates how crazy it's going to be a little bit probably, but it's still going to be a big, I think, afternoon game there at Auburn there. Oklahoma, and again, like I was saying, they're not familiar with going to Auburn's house, man, because they're new to the SEC. They're not used to going there, and it's going to be their first true road game, which is always a difficult spot to be in, especially this late in the season. When you don't play your first true road game until the 4th week of the season, you're like really used to playing at home, so it tends to actually shake you a little bit more because you're just not used to it. You're used to playing already, or you're not used to playing those true road games yet, especially a big SEC road game like this. So I think it's going to be a problem for Oklahoma. And then Auburn, they're not looking as good, obviously. They're 2-2 and not ranked, and they're coming off a really ugly game. People were making fun of how ugly that game was last week between Auburn and Arkansas. That was a game that was just a lot of turnovers for both sides in that game, Auburn and Arkansas. There was one stretch of like 20-something seconds in that game where 3 interceptions were thrown, 2 from one quarterback and 1 from the other. I forget which one threw the 2. I think it was probably Auburn threw the 2 because, as I'm going to talk about, I think Auburn lost the turnover battle in that game. That is an ugly-looking loss for Auburn, dude, last week. So the public's going to be looking at that, too. They were a home favorite, and they lost to Arkansas. But if you look at the stats, Auburn actually outplayed Arkansas, man. They outgained Arkansas by almost 100 yards. They did not outpossess or out-first down them, though. But they were also -3 in turnovers. They committed 5 turnovers in that game. So you think that might be why they lost? Yeah, if you commit 5 turnovers, you're probably not going to have a chance to win this game, man. And they still only lost by 10, even though they committed that many turnovers. They outgained them by 100, like I said. So that final score is a bit misleading, not really indicative of what actually happened in that game. Oh, one thing that did happen, though, I will shout out that Auburn, I think it was on the Auburn side. I forget his name, Champ something. I can't remember his last name. I think it was on the Auburn side. One of their defenders, a play after he made a ridiculous hit on one of Arkansas's ball carriers and knocked his helmet straight off. The very next play, that Auburn player, same player who made the huge hit, had like a non-contact injury that was away from the ball where I don't know if his cleats got stuck in the field or what it was, but he like completely wrecked his leg and broke his leg, even though it was not a play where he even was like involved in contact with other players. I don't know how it even happened, but it seemed like it was like a Joe Theismann-esque disgusting leg injury to the point where ESPN, I actually had the game on ESPN and I missed when that happened because I think I had switched it to another game or something at that point. So I didn't see when that actually happened, but ESPN refused to even show the replay. The whole team was out on the field, just because it was a really dire situation, a really gruesome injury. I didn't see it. I don't know how that actually happens. I don't know how, when you're not even near the ball on a play, how you break your leg like Lawrence Taylor absolutely tackled you and bent your leg backwards. I don't know how that happens by you just running like near the sideline, I think is where it happened. I don't know, but just an added little tidbit there from what happened in that Auburn game. So they will be without one of their better defenders in this game. So yay me, I'm still playing on Auburn despite that. I don't think it's going to matter that much. I don't think that one guy, Champ, whatever, I don't think he factors into the line very much at all. The fact that he's out. This is a horrible spot for Oklahoma. This is my favorite play of the week, the Auburn side. And those are my plays, man. Oh, man, hour 15 minutes. All right. So my plays this week, once again, Kansas State -5, Minnesota +10.5, Baylor -3, and Auburn +2, which, like I said, I know you have to lay like 1 now on Auburn, but I don't really think it's that much of a difference. Or lay a money line on them, play the money line. You're still just basically asking them to win the game either way. So hopefully those points, for your sake, it will really end for mine because I want everybody to win here. I mean, hopefully, for all of our sake, Auburn does not wind up losing by 1, so they just cover the better number. Although I'll still be happy about that. New Auburn QB, Hugh Freeze seems to be cracking. Yeah, he's freezing, you mean? Yeah, I mean, Auburn's offense has not been playing. Well, they put up good offensive numbers last week, though, man. An Arkansas defense that probably isn't that good, but Auburn at least put up a lot of yards in that game. They were moving the ball. It's just that he needs to stop making mistakes, basically, because the yardage number wasn't bad in that game. Nate, you took Oklahoma. Oh, boy, you're going to be oppo me. At least you got a better number. At least you got them as an underdog and did not play them as a favorite. So you got the better number there. So you and I are on opposite underdogs there. Imagine if we both win, Nate. Because you could win. I do have a little bit. I always sprinkle on the money line, especially when it's a +2 underdog. I put 10% of my bet on the money line, but you and I could both win on that game, Nate. If Oklahoma wins by 1 point, you'll win and I will still win because Auburn will still cover my number. So it's one of those games where, I think it's legitimate line movement on Auburn, but like those games that are close to being a pick'em game like that, you also can kind of see guys like try to rig the market and they'll take they want to take like one side as an underdog, try to push that side to a favorite, and then come back and take the other side also as an underdog, so they can get both sides as an underdog. There are guys that play that way. All right, thanks, guys. I don't think I saw any other games shouted out there, right, that you wanted me to talk about. I'm not talking. There are some other big games on the board that I'm not talking about, but if so, I mean, you can ask me about it. You can ask me if you want to join the Better Off Dead X chat, the Twitter chat as well. We have not too many people in there, but we really just we have a lot of like sports related memes and shit posting going on in there. Thanks, Adam. It's a long show. I'm talking for hours here, for over an hour here. It's a good segue though to follow me, Tower Gang Toad, on Twitter, and go follow the Tower Gang podcast, the most offensive podcast on the planet. We just had Jeremy Kaufman, the famous Fed fighter. Jeremy Kaufman was on the show this week, and I came in and ruined the entire stream at the very end of it and ended the stream probably with about 5 minutes to go on it too early by a little bit because I was too amped up just to jump in and just say hi really quickly. It's way too easy to hit the wrong button on mobile, man. I'm retarded. I'm sorry, but go follow the Tower Game podcast, man. Every Wednesday nights, we're on all the things. You know where to find us. And sign up for the Patreon, patreon.com/TowerGang. You get bonus content, live post-show, live pre-show, extra content all over the place, and you get to hang out in a Telegram with us. And I have a channel or whatever you call it, a thread in our Tower Gang Telegram that is Toad's betting chat. So you can talk betting with me there as well. Adam, did you miss the Tower Gang show entirely, or did you miss me because I wasn't there? Oh, you missed me coming. I came in like right at the end. You can go back and watch it. And I literally accidentally ended the stream while it was still going on. It was not seamless. I have 2 channels. That's right. I'm on both of them tonight. Thanks for hanging out, guys. Have a good night. Have a good weekend, everybody. I'll be back with you tomorrow night, of course, because I've been doing the NFL shows on Saturday night, and I'll be back again. I have no life, obviously, or actually, on some of these shows that I've done, I actually still go to like a comedy show or a concert, and then I come back and I still do this at like midnight or 1 a.m. I'm just completely insane, man. All right. Thanks for hanging out, guys. Again, have a good weekend. Let's get some wins on this college football slate tomorrow. Let's have a good Saturday. I keep doing this because my camera goes out of focus when I go from a lighter background color like ESPN to this, and because my TV on ESPN here keeps like wigging out basically and like changing the lighting or whatever. Love you guys too. We're all retarded here. Retard love everywhere, man. Let's have a good one. Let's get these wins. Peace out, everybody.